In this lesson, we are looking at another way to write equations in slope-intercept form, and this is using a different form of an equation. It's point-slope form, and this is really helpful when you are given a point and you're given a slope and asked to find the slope-intercept form part of an equation. So we're going to go through on how to do that in this video. All right, so this is a new form of an equation. So we're going to take a look at what this looks like. It is written as y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So point slope form is the equation written with the slope and a point. So that's going to go on the left-hand side of your notes. And as you see on the right-hand side, we're given these pieces of information with this, what the equation looks like. So x1 and y1 are referring to the coordinates of a point. Okay, so you will be given a point or asked to choose a point. Those are where those are going to go. Leave the other ones alone, which is different from what we have been doing. We want to use the x1 and the y1. As usual, m is still and will always be our slope. So this is something you'll want to commit to memory. All right, so now we're going to take information such as a point and a slope, and we are going to write the equation in point-slope form, and then oftentimes you're told to convert it to either slope-intercept form or standard form. You do not have to worry about standard form at the moment. That does not come until the end of this unit. So how do we write an equation for the point-slope form of a line that goes through -9, -3, and has a slope of 1/2? So as you go down below on your own question, you can see we substitute the value of the slope and let the x and y coordinates be x1 and y1. So here, these are my little ones in y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. There's my original formula. So we would be using these values of -9 and -3 in place of the x1 and the y1. So our equation would look like this. Y minus -3 equals -1/2 times x minus -9. That's a lot of negatives. So the first thing that we are going to do when we are working with these is to just simply simplify the double negatives. So the minus a -3 and minus a -9. This is going to become y plus 3 equals -1/2 x in parentheses plus 9. You have now just taken the information and written it in point-slope form. There is no direction saying that you need to now convert this into slope-intercept form. So for this, we would just leave it as it is. As I mentioned, you want to know what the point-slope form of an equation is. So I'm going to write it right above here. And the default is always minus. So in this case, you're given the equation y minus 10 equals 3 times x minus 5. We know easily by looking at this that the slope is 3. There's nothing fancy about it. There's nothing we have to do. It can be a fraction. It is just that number in front of the parentheses. But when we're working with our point, because the default is minus, like in this case, y minus 10, this point, the y1 value is actually positive 10. And the 5, where the x1 is positive. Because if we didn't know the point-slope form of the equation, we would be looking at 5 and 10, and we would be writing minus 10 equals 3 times x minus 5. we don't know that form of the equation right away. So in this case, when you are given the equation, if the sign is minus, that part of the point is positive. If the sign is positive, then that part of the point is negative. And so here's an example. You don't have to write this down, but here is an example of what that might look like. Y plus 3 equals 5/2 x minus 2. Okay, so for this equation, our slope is pretty easy. It's 5/2. And the point, x1 and y1, my x1 here is going to be positive 2 because there's a minus here. It's the opposite. And because this is a plus 3, my point is actually negative. And so if we were to work backwards and put in information, we would see that y minus a negative 3 equals 5/2 x minus 2. So the plus comes from there being minusing of a negative. So how do we write the equation if we've been given it in point-slope form? Now take it and turn it into slope-intercept form. So we know slope-intercept is y equals mx plus b. This is written as y minus 6 equals negative 2 times x minus 7. So the first step in this case is to always distribute the number that is outside of the parentheses, or in this case, the slope. So we're going to do negative 2 times x and negative 2 times negative 7. I'm leaving this y minus 6 alone until I get to step 2. Okay. So I have y minus 6 equals negative x plus 14. And I got the 14 because negative 2 times negative 7 is positive 14. So my last step is to isolate the y. We want the y by itself. And it will either be by adding or subtracting. And in this case, we're going to add 6 to both sides and get our final solution of y equals negative 2x plus 20. And that would be how you would take an equation that is written in point-slope form and turn it into slope-intercept form. You are going to try the on your own question, which is right below this one on the right-hand side of your packet. Y plus 6 equals negative 3/4 x plus 8. And if you look on the next two slides, I've given you the answer as well as a video solution. Okay, in this on your own problem, and this is the only one on this page, we're going to be writing the equation in slope-intercept form. So you can notice that this is already written in point-slope form. I am going to distribute. My first step is to always distribute. So y plus 6 equals negative 3/4 x plus a negative 3/4 times 8, which is negative 3 times 8, negative 24 over 4. Okay. Now I want to simplify this negative 24 over 4. Y plus 6 equals negative 3/4 x. And this turns into a minus 6. Our final step is to isolate the y. So distribute first, like we did, and now I want to isolate the y by subtracting 6 from both sides. This does not give me 0. This gives me y equals negative 3/4 x minus 12. You can use a calculator to help you as needed. Okay, so we can use our point-slope form and 2 points to find an equation. So I prefer using point-slope form over slope-intercept form. It just depends on what you like. So here's how we're going to go through. We need to remember that y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Okay. We also need to remember that m is our slope and x1 and y1 are our coordinates. So if we are given 2 points, the first thing we want to do is find the slope. We are not always given the slope. Okay, we'll do an example in this of just a minute. From there, just like we did with y equals mx plus b, we're going to choose a point to use. I go for the lowest amount of numbers, the smallest numbers, and the least number of negatives. From there, we substitute the value of slope into our equation and let the x and y coordinates be the x1 and y1. We rewrite the equation in the form needed, oftentimes needing to distribute and isolate when using slope-intercept form. So going off of the previous example, we are going to use -1 and 7 and 8 and -2. Then we are going to convert our point-slope form of that equation into slope-intercept form. So point-slope, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. We need to know slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b, and we also need to remember how to find slope. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I realize that is a lot of x's, 1's, y's, 1's, etc. So go step by step. The first step is to find the slope. Okay, so we're going to work with our points, and we're going to use m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I'm just going to label them x1, y1, x2, y2. I'm going to find my slope. -2 minus 7, all divided by 8, minus a -1. That gives us -9 over 8 plus 1, which is 9. When we reduce this, our slope is -1. From there, we pick a point, and you know what? To make things easier, I'm going to use the one that already has x1 and y1 on it. So the point that I'm using is -1, 7, and my slope is -1. So the first part of the question tells us to write an equation in point-slope form. So y minus 7 equals -1 times x minus a -1. So y minus 7 equals -1, and I'm going to simplify this into +1. Now, if that was all the directions said, we would be done. But the directions say then convert it to slope-intercept form. So this is where we need to distribute and isolate. And I'm going to do this in a different color so that you can see that I am taking that form and making it something different. So y minus 7 equals -1 times x plus 1. So distribute the -1 first. Y minus 7 equals -x, or -1x, minus 1. Then we isolate. Add 7 to both sides. Y equals -1x plus 6 when you do this, because you're doing -1 plus 7. So here, you now have two forms of the equation that give you information and can be graphed, okay? We've got one that just tells us the point and the slope in point-slope form, and then the other one is written in slope-intercept form. You will have plenty of practice doing this. Ignore anything that says convert to standard form for the time being. We will visit that after we have completed 4-5.